Hi and welcome back to the channel. Sometimes things go wrong, and the thing that went wrong this time is the first part of this video. It's going to look very different than most of the videos. So I've redone it. I'm redoing it in fact right now. And thank you very much for watching. So let's talk about comedies. I've got 3 comedies for you this time. We're going from the sublime to the ridiculous in these 3 movies. The third one is actually an action film as well as a comedy. Set right here in Melbourne, where we are in about our 38th year of lockdown. Somehow we're managing. So it seemed like a good idea to do comedies this time, because comedies cheer people up if they're done well. If they're not done well, they'll piss people off. But nonetheless, I've got 3 comedies for you. Let's get started with the first one from 1958. One of Alec Guinness's most interesting and most fun movies. Now, we know him for a lot of other things. He did something in 1977. He did Bridge on the River Kwai. He did The Man in the White Suit. He did Our Man in Havana. He's done any number of different things. He was also in the Quiller Memorandum with George Segal. But this one is an interesting film for a number of reasons. It is called The Horse's Mouth, based on a novel by Joyce Carey. And by the way, Joyce is a guy in this case. About a very disreputable artist called Gully Jimson, played by Alec Guinness, who's just out of jail. He's just spent a month in jail for something we don't know about. And he has this idea to do 3 great paintings in 3 large scales. So he goes back to the little houseboat on the Thames where he lives and plans things out.
That's a real foot. No one ever painted a foot like that before. It's a leggy leg, all right. If that leg could talk, it would say, I walk for you, I run for you, I kneel for you.
He first goes to see an ex-girlfriend of his called Cokie, played wonderfully by Kay Walsh.
I suppose you're proud of yourself.
I put it on the slate, Cokie, and lend me 50 quid.
Don't be silly.
I'll make it 40 then. I've got to get back to work.
What about the £4, 9 and 6 you already owe me?
I've not been in a position to earn it.
And she helps him go and see a very rich man who ended up with a lot of his paintings, which was sold to the rich man by Gully's ex-wife. His ex-wife is also one of his ex-models. She's remarried and she has a child. And interestingly enough, there's still a fondness between the two of them. She's played by Renee Houston. She's quite charming in the movie. They then go and see the rich guy who has all the paintings. And he's played by none other than Ernest Thesiger, who was also Dr. Pretorius in The Bride of Frankenstein, amongst other things. He was also in The Man in the White Suit with Alec Guinness earlier in that decade. This guy's fed up because Gully keeps making threatening phone calls to him from public phone boxes. And he explains to Cokie that he's actually given Gully a lot of money over the years. And then Gully decides to go and see another rich couple who want one of his paintings. Now it just so happens that they're on their way to Jamaica for 2 weeks. And almost by accident, Gully gets very, very drunk in their house and wakes up after they're gone. He then decides he's going to make a giant mural on one of their walls of the raising of Lazarus. Things get very, very anarchic from there. A sculptor, played by Michael Gough, comes in and decides that the space is perfect for him to do a new sculpture. They lower in a large block of stone into the building, and that goes wrong. And ultimately, Gully ends up making a beautiful mural on the wall of this house while simultaneously wrecking it. And Gully Jimson is just a force of nature. He's rude, he's crude, he's lecherous, but he is also a dedicated artist. He is passionate about art. He is passionate about what people see through art. Gully also has an assistant called Nosy, played by Mike Morgan. And tragically, Mike Morgan died towards the end of production. He's only a young guy, but he got meningitis and died, so part of his role was dubbed by another actor. His assistant Nosy helps him out. He buys him cigarettes. He's basically a dog's body. He wants to be an artist himself, and he's given some words of wisdom from Gully, which really are good advice for artists and people who want to do anything creative. This movie is full of passion for art. It's full of passion for creativity and creators. And he gets obsessed about feet for some reason. He's very Quentin Tarantino like that, Gully Jimson. And he's obsessed with human feet. He's interested in young women's feet, in old women's feet, in the feet of a black Jamaican waiter he meets, Feet are all over Gully Jimson's work. Between the art of John Bradby and the wonderfulness of Alec Guinness playing this totally anarchic force of nature character, who ends up doing his last painting as a very large mural on the wall of a bombed out church which is about to be demolished. And he recruits a team of art students whom he charges for the privilege to help him with this enormous mural he's painting. And that's kind of cool because you see him passing on his skills, even though he's a curmudgeon, he's a lecherous person, all he cares about is getting the job done and getting the painting done. You actually see Gully Jimson passing on expertise to people who are equally passionate about art, including the wife of Robert Coote's very wealthy character. She ends up joining the mural making. And this movie is funny, the dialogue is incredibly funny, but it's also about passion and about creativity and about the fact that rich people can buy art, but for the most part they can't create it. At best they can own the work, but they can't be part of that storm of creativity that makes something a wonderful piece of art. If you haven't seen The Horse's Mouth, you need to see it. That's the bottom line for this. You need to see this from there. As I said, there is a Criterion edition, so it is available out there. The edition I've got's the Australian one, which I don't mind having. It's nice to have all the extras of a Criterion edition, but I think with a movie this wonderful and this kind of humorous and whimsical and quite transgressive for 1958 in some ways, I think that you don't really need to have the Criterion edition. Michael Gough can be an actor, particularly in his early roles in the 1950s and 60s, who can be very mannered and very kind of stagey on screen. But in this one, it kind of shows the best of him as an actor, because even though he is over the top, he's kind of pulled back a little bit. And his sculptor is a nice little foil for Gully. They're both passionate about their art. There's a kind of grudging respect between them as well. And I like that. I like the fact that everybody, almost, the Gully Jimson meets, he co-opts into his vision of art. And that is kind of magical. This movie is one of those life-affirming, really interesting films that's got a surprising depth for a 1950s English comedy, because it's about something. It's not just about snubbing your nose at authority. It's about creativity, it's about art, it's about life. It's about knowing who you are and running with it. And I really appreciate it for that. The second movie is a movie I've liked since VHS days. I actually owned a copy of it in VHS before I got rid of all of my VHS tapes, because there wasn't room for me and the VHS tapes where I lived. And it is a movie by Paul Bartel from 1989, a comedy which I really like a lot. I think it's incredibly underrated, and it's called Scenes from the Class Struggle in Beverly Hills. And it's about, as it says, Scenes from Class Struggle in Beverly Hills. It's about two families who live next to each other in very, very posh circumstances. The woman in one case is played by Jacqueline Bisset, who's a TV actress who's married a very wealthy man who recently died. He's played by Paul Mazursky because he comes back as a ghost during part of the film. The other family is played by Mary Woronov and Wallace Shawn from Princess Bride and My Dinner with Andre, and they've just split up. They each have a child, one played by Barrett Oliver, the other played by Rebecca Schaefer, who are teenaged. They have servants, they have friends, and Mary Woronov's character's brother, who was a playwright played by Ed Begley Jr., turns up to stay with them with his new wife Tobel, played by Anisha Walker, who is a black woman. And that kind of plays into the class structure there. Tobel has an incredibly varied and colourful backstory, which I really liked. And they also have servants. In this case, the three main servants are played by Robert Beltran, and Frank, played by Ray Sharkey, who's a kind of bisexual chauffeur for the other family, who is definitely an interesting person, let's put it that way. There's also a cook called Rosa, who may or may not be an Aztec priestess, And over one weird weekend, we get a kind of French farce comedy of relationships starting and ending, of bets made between the two chauffeurs, which has a very interesting ending, and how various people knew each other previously and didn't know each other previously, and how the different classes intermingle in this really weird menage of people. Now, Jacqueline Bisset's not particularly known for her comedies, but she's really good in this one. Mary Warrenoff's in there. We also get Paul Bartel playing a thinologist, a weight loss doctor, which is odd given the kind of portliness of Paul Bartel, who gets some of the good lines in there.
This time, I've tackled some serious social issues, and I've tried to confront them without compromise.
And we also get some incredibly great music. There's a kind of syrupy, sweet string score by Stanley Myers at the start. And the movie also incorporates some classical music, most particularly the Gollywog's Cakewalk by Debussy, which is the kind of interesting music we get when everybody's doing their walk of shame after a night of passion with people with whom they don't normally have nights of passion.
It's an elegant film, I think. It's got well-defined characters and realistic dialogue.
You pretentious ass-licking poser.
Now, the movie is funny, it's transgressive, it's interesting, and it's kind of inclusive as well. It plays very well to a modern audience because sexuality is not particularly taboo in this one. Various different kinds of sexuality are not taboo in this one.
Even some pretty good action.
In broad daylight, doggy style.
The rich people are kind of clueless, and some of the servants are kind of clueless, and the young are sometimes wiser than the old, and it's just a lot of fun to watch. Now, it was written, interestingly, by a guy called Bruce Wagner, who also gave us a TV series about which I've spoken on the channel before, Wild Palms. Wild Palms has some aspects of it that are about wealthy people as well, which is one of the themes that Bruce Wagner's work often has. He did a really good novel about Hollywood and about the Hollywood system and about Los Angeles called Force Majeure, which I recommend you read because it really is, it's almost like a modern day Day of the Locust in some way, and you should check that one out. But scenes from the class struggle in Beverly Hills, being a Paul Bartel joint, it is very funny. It's well observed about the lives of the rich and kind of half famous. So this one's definitely a recommend from me. It's funny, it's transgressive. I like the way that the different groups of people misinterpret each other. I like the way there are secrets, and when the secrets are revealed, and some of them are quite life-changing, that people just kind of roll with it. There's a very kind of laissez-faire attitude and an acceptance of human frailty, let's say, in this movie, which I like. It's got a nice style to it as well. Unfortunately, Paul Bartel died early, and it would have been nice to have seen more movies from him. Of course, we got Death Race 2000, we got Eating Raoul, we got a few other things, but I liked him as a director and as an actor as well. And he really did tap into something with this movie. It really does play as a comedy of manners and almost like a French farce, like a Fado play or something like that. The best is brought out in pretty much everyone in this particular movie, which I kind of like too. It doesn't play heroes and villains, it just goes with the silliness of human frailty. And I really appreciate that in a film. Now, the last one I don't have a physical copy of here, but I do have one on order. It's a little hard to find. From 2002. It's a very late era Ozploitation movie, filmed here in Melbourne, and I used to work with one of the guys who was an extra in it. It's an action film, it's a comedy, it's got that grungy low budget feel about it, and it is called Trojan Warrior, starring Stan the Man Longanides, who was a kickboxing champion in 4 different disciplines, a world kickboxing champion. He's a Melbourne guy of Greek heritage, and Melbourne is the second biggest Greek population in the world after Athens. So Stan's in there. He's playing a guy called Ajax, who is an ex-cop who went undercover, then got done over by the powers that be, ended up spending 2 years in jail, and then came back again. We don't know what he does for a living because it's not really part of the movie. But his cousin, Theo, played by Arthur Angel, has some information on the big mob boss in Melbourne, a guy called Peroni, who is played by Henry Mars, who, apart from owning a couple of nightclubs in Fitzroy here in Melbourne, was also the lead singer and the main creative engine of a very cool 80s and 90s Australian band called Bachelors from Prague. Now, if you want to look up some of their music, it's got a really cool beatnik hip feel about it, and I really like Bachelors from Prague. I saw them once at an outdoor gig in St Kilda, and the band had to do instrumental for 30 minutes while Henry Mars was looking to get a slab of beer, and there was a queue at the pub. So the band basically filled for 30 minutes while their lead singer went and got some beer. So Henry Mars is there playing Peroni. You get a whole bunch of weird and wonderful local celebrities in there. You get Mark Jacko Jackson playing Zorg, one of the henchmen who's going after Theo and the floppy disk of information he has about Peroni's operation. Ajax and Theo are fleeing from about 300 to 400 gangsters. Every brothel, every nightclub, every cafe, every kebab shop in Melbourne is looking for Theo. And there's a large bounty not on his head, but on his tattooed penis, because they want proof of death, and so Peroni has requested that whoever kills Theo brings his severed penis to Peroni, because he's that kind of guy, I suppose. You get a lot of action, and you get a lot of scenes in various places in Melbourne. They filmed a lot of it in real strip clubs and in real brothels and in real cafes. There are some locations I'm familiar with, like Smith Street in Collingwood. And Stan the Man Longanides is a hell of a good fighter. He did a few movies, but mostly these days he's running as a motivational speaker and as a trainer. And his skills are first rate. He really does... when he fights, he is really bloody scary. He does go up against another martial artist played by an older guy called Roland Dantes, who also had a career in martial arts cinema, a Filipino guy. And there's a pretty good fight between Stan the Man Longanides and Roland Dantes that works quite well. The weird thing is you get so many kind of references in this movie and little cameos by people that only people who lived in Melbourne around the turn of the century will get. But that doesn't matter. The big one for you to look for if you see this film, remember the movie Chopper with Eric Bana playing a guy called Chopper Reed? You get the real Chopper Reed doing a cameo in this film, which is really cool. He was always an ugly bastard, I suppose. He turns up very briefly as a hologram, which is really odd. You get some comedy bits in here, like when Ajax leads a whole bunch of guys who are chasing him into a white supremacist meeting, whereas most of the guys chasing him are of various ethnic origins, and an enormous brawl ensues to cover for Ajax running away. There are lots of little bits and pieces like that. There's all the things you want from an exploitation movie. There's violence, there's comedy, there's gratuitous nudity, there's good acting, and Arthur Angel particularly playing Theo is a good actor, as is John Brumpton, who plays the main uncorrupted cop who is helping Ajax out. John Brumpton's been in any number of Australian films. Really good, solid character actor. And if you see John Brumpton in anything, you're going to know that you're going to at least get full value from him. Trojan Warrior I saw at the time it came out in the cinemas. It's kind of got a feel about it which may well not translate well to people from other places. I don't know. But there was a kind of subculture here in Melbourne around the 90s and the turn of the century, which was based around 3RRR radio station, a community radio station, which was full of all sorts of different people doing community radio and doing music. They did concerts, they did gigs, and Trojan Warrior was written by one of the guys who did the all-night sessions, a guy called Hedley Gritter. That's not his real name. His real name's Titlebaum, but he goes by Hedley Gritter on his Triple R gig, and also on the screenplay for this movie. If you're in the mood for just a kind of B action, exploitation, comedy, drama with kickboxing and tons of really, really rough looking extras, you can't go past Trojan Warrior. You should try to find a copy of it. I don't know whether it's on YouTube. I, for some reason, had got rid of my copy of it, and I've only just ordered a new one off eBay. There are a few of them on eBay, but I think the prices are a little high. You might need to shop around for them. And it was only ever released in Australia, so it's region 4, I think it is, coded. Nonetheless, if you can find a copy of it, and if you can find it even by subterranean sources, you're going to have a good time when you see Trojan Warrior. So there are 3 comedies for you. Thank you very much for watching. As always, please consider liking and subscribing, hitting the notification bell, and leaving a comment. You can also support the channel on Patreon by going to patreon.com/paleocinema. So yeah, as I said at the start of this video, we're in lockdown for the foreseeable future, and it's kind of like Groundhog Day, only you don't get to wake up the next morning listening to Sonny and Cher. Look after yourselves, stay safe, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies, watch the horse's mouth scenes from the class struggle in Beverly Hills and Trojan Warrior, and I'll catch you next time.